hands up everybody who trusts academics. You've obviously been around the block. But one or two of you are a bit naive, I think. Okay, hands up how many of you trust business ethicists? Now, I think the problem is nobody knows what a business ethicist is. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting thing. It's 10 minutes, so I'm going to race through this and just make the critical case, and then you can engage. The first point I want to make is that business ethics is not a single thing. It's controversial. It's disputational. There's no single line. You might think that business ethics would want to support sustainability, but some people do not support that in business ethics. There are all kinds of issues that people work through. It's an ambiguous thing. Secondly, business ethics does have, however, a good function in terms of connective thinking. And if we use it effectively, especially through ideas like responsibility, which I'll go through rapidly, it can be very useful. Importantly, though, it needs to feed into practice. And that comes down very importantly to governance. How do boards of governance actually practice responsibility and the related virtues? And I want to argue that actually this is about virtue. And I want to argue then at the end that I don't think sustainability should try and work for the moral high ground. That's the wrong dynamic. I think that we should be working for realistic thinking, critical thinking, consciousness, creativity and shared and negotiated responsibility, and that all the work with sustainability emerges from that. We'll see how the argument goes. Okay. I'm not sure if William Wordsworth actually did say that, by the way. It's on the internet, but there's no reference. We don't know where he said it or what is it. I suspect it's another example of internet not really being careful. But it's a nice notion. In modern business, it is not the crook who is to be feared most. It is the honest man who doesn't know what he's doing. This cooperative bank and their chairman. I'm sure he was a vaguely honest man. You all know, dear old, what was his name? Feathers' father, the chair of the cooperative bank who didn't know anything about banking. You all know this? Well, you should know it. It's really important because he was an honest and nice man, but didn't know what he was doing. Yeah, I think that's part of my message today. So let's forget about the ambiguity of business ethics and the problems that they might bring in. Not least because ethics in itself can be a problem. As soon as I tell people that I'm a professor of applied and professional ethics, they stand back a bit. It's that moment, is he judging me? I don't want to have prescription. Ethics, I want to argue, is not prescriptive. It's about practical virtues and how we work those in terms of our everyday practice. So let's forget about the fact that it's a complex area. Let's see how we can connect. And we can connect to sustainability via this notion of responsibility. Hands up, all those who are responsible. Now that gets it more interesting. How do you think that you don't feel that you're a responsible person?
Of course I'm responsible for
Okay. Yeah. But actually owning the idea that you're responsible is a very interesting thing, because you have to then to think, who am I responsible for? What am I responsible for? What does it mean to be responsible in this particular area? Am I responsible for more than one thing, or just for one thing? And we're immediately into a whole number of different questions. Responsibility, according to Aristotle, let's not forget, he was not an abstract thinker. He advised Alexander the Great. He didn't always listen to Aristotle, I'm afraid, but the key point is that Aristotle was practice and intellect centred. And ownership of the intellect is also critical. He suggests the first two of those, imputability. Imputability, can I impute the action that I'm about to take in thumping this bloke to here? Did I really intend? Was I responsible for something? Or was I mentally incapacitated. It's about responsibility, knowing what I'm doing, knowing what you're doing, knowing what your practice is, knowing the context of that practice, the social and physical environment, knowing the purpose and worth of that practice. What is the purpose and worth of your business practice? It's a crucial area. And alongside that, knowing how and owning how you perceive yourself and your world. Because our perception is something that we are responsible for. All too often we don't take that seriously. Okay, it's all there. If you look at the HBOS, this was a report done by Parliament. It was quite clear that the board of HBOS were very good people. I'm not knocking them. The one problem was the majority of them were not bankers. They were retailers. They did not know about banking. That's extraordinary. Men being paid a lot of money, not knowing what they were doing. Not knowing anything about their context, about anything around them. And so this core initial notion of responsibility wasn't part of their practice. And this is more than moral. It's intellectual, psychological, existential. Whoa! Sartre, however bad the world is, I am responsible for engaging with that world and working things through. Existential responsibility. It's based in deliberation, how we make our decisions. It's based around practical wisdom, how we reflect upon the good and embody that in our organisation. We've worked on values audits with several boards, and so often, in fact most of the time, in fact all the time, the first question is, board members, what are your values? 3/4 of an hour later we have a wonderful list, and the board members are really pumped up. Well, these are great values. Second question, can you name a decision that you took in the last 12 months which actually referred to any of those values and worked out how they were working through your practice? And in every case, they could not name a decision. It's a basic, Aristotle would say, it's a basic virtue phronesis, being able to understand the good and put it into your practice and embody in your practice and to make decisions in the light of that. Okay, so this is all about ideas, values, perception, and so forth, and being aware of those. If you've not read Margaret Heffernan's Willful Blindness, read it. It demonstrates very clearly that if we do not practice this kind of critical virtue, intellectual virtue, we end up being blind, and therefore we make bad decisions and we're unaware of our social and physical environment. This is just to pause for 5 seconds. This was me several months ago, and actually, as you come up out of that water, which was 2 degrees below zero, and you suddenly see the world, you see it differently. Wow, before that you were blind. Now you can see. Now you're aware of the environment. Most of us spend our time indoors, actually cushioning ourselves away from the environment, away from the social and physical environment. And my worry is that too often we move into the sustainability of things without having thought these things through, without actually owning it. And I would argue in terms of governance that this leads to an organisation which does not understand why the guys at the top are doing what they're doing. This is talking about responsibility being worked throughout the organisation. How long have we got left?
You're all right.
Wait.
Few minutes, you're all right.
Okay. Accountability, this is obvious, but it's really very important that accountability links into integrity, and integrity is based in identity and self-presentation. It's all about how we relate to other people and how we see ourselves in relation to those. I would want to argue that this is also about mutuality, and throughout any organisation you see this lack of mutual accountability. Higher education. Are the estates in general in universities actually, that's the people who organise the space, are they accountable to the academics? And if so, how? Do they ever talk to them? Do they ever work through what they've done and share the different narratives? Answer no. Are the academics accountable to the estates? Answer no, because they've not talked with each other. And accountability is about dialogue, about working through narratives, and working through a mutual situation. Okay, this is finally the area where, generally speaking, sustainability ends up. The nice big, we're responsible for the world. Business ethics have worked that through in terms of the debates with Milton Friedman, who says, well, the job of business is to make money, nothing else. Obey the law, yeah, but that's its core job. But then we've got a whole bunch of different positions that emerge. Dostoevsky, Jonas, the moral imperative, Bauman, postmodern ethics, Arendt, many of these coming from the Holocaust experience, and therefore focusing in on the notion that we are responsible for everything. But even that idea, it's a hard one to take on board. How can we be responsible for everything? It immediately demands that we're moving into something much more interesting, which is about interconnectivity. Look at the King 3 report on governance from South Africa. It bases its work in a philosophy of Ubuntu. South Africa, I am because you are. So again, I would want to argue that part of this is about moving back to worldviews and interrogating those as well. Often, business ethics tries to move into this kind of bigger integrated area. And so we find examples such as the total integrity management approach. And that doesn't just look at sustainability in terms of the environment, it looks at conflict resolution, peace building. How can business be involved in peace building? It really is a truly integrated approach. Those are possibilities that can be worked through. Whichever way, final 2 minutes, okay? The argument is that all of those areas of responsibility need to be practiced. They are all interconnected, and they are all at the heart of a multiple sense of responsibility. The key question: how can we sustain our responsibility for all the relationships in which we are? Mid-staffs, great example. You all know the mid-staffs case. Yeah. Wonderful example. I am responsible for being a doctor. I am not responsible for the health project in this area. I am not responsible for a National Health Service. Now that whole interagency governance really starts to raise huge questions about responsibility and how we govern that kind of area in our working. Only when we address that do we begin to work through the wider responsibilities and to ensure that all those in the organisations are actually on board. And it's right there about genuine dialogue. How often? Look at this wonderful building here. It's based upon principles of sustainability. Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, we really do recycle this stuff. But where in this building, as you come in, have you seen the message about sustainability? Where in this building have you seen the basic ideas behind it? Where in this building do you see the actual working through of the values and how they're connected to all of this? Big question. Unfortunately, the DVC isn't here, so he can't hear my critique. But nonetheless, it's a huge question, and that's part of the integrity of our organisation, leading to a wider view of integrity and the environment. So, final point. I think this is more controversial. I think we need to be aware of the enthusiasts, and I'm conscious that many of you will be enthusiasts about sustainability. We need to be aware of the paradigm changes. We're going to change your paradigm. It has to be changed, etc. Because behind that then comes all the dynamics which are not going to enable people to actually give an account, to hold their ideas responsibly, to actually work through what they are doing. Beware the ad hominem dynamics. Nestle are capitalistic, this and that and the other. But that doesn't help dialogue. It doesn't help critical thinking. And simplistic, syllogistic ideas don't help that either. Final point. All of this comes down to also how do we teach this in universities? What about the future of responsibility? We can, of course, work through sustainability ideas, and that's quite right. But even more important, I would argue, is to work through those key virtues and enable students to become responsible leaders so that they can actually come out with wisdom, with justice, with courage, and with clear communication capacities. That's it. Okay? Thank you.